Hello, I'm Shane M. Nygaard, and welcome to Yves Saint Laurent, the genius of Twilight. This is a Mythic Currents video. The sixth house of an astrology chart is the time of twilight, not fully day, not yet night. It is the threshold period where forms soften, distinctions blur, and opposites begin to mingle. Yves Saint Laurent's chart is tailored to this twilight. With Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto in the sixth house, his genius emerged through the in-between, art and fashion, masculine and feminine, shadow and glamour, discipline and dream. His work did not simply choose between opposites, it sewed them together. And with Saturn in Pisces in his first house, this twilight did not remain abstract. It became visible. It became embodied. It became silhouette, fabric, movement, and style. Saturn gave form to the Piscean ocean, allowing fantasy to enter the world as something real. In the language of James Hillman from the Soul's Code, we might say that Saint Laurent did not merely rise into fame, he grew down into image, craft, and fate. His genius descended into cloth. Again, in the language of James Hillman from the Soul's Code, a life does not only grow upward into achievement, success, or visibility, it also grows downward into image, body, temperament, circumstance, vocation, and fate. This is a crucial way to understand Yves Saint Laurent. His genius was not simply that he became famous or successful or influential. His genius was that something deeply imaginal in him found its way down into form. The child who created theater shows for his family and designed costumes for paper dolls did not leave that world behind. That image world descended into the atelier, into the runway, into the cut of a jacket, into the movement of fabric, into the silhouette of the modern woman. This is where Hillman and astrology begin speaking the same language. A natal chart is not merely a list of traits, it is a pattern of incarnation, a symbolic map of how the soul's image seeks a life. For Saint Laurent, the soul grew downward into twilight, into the hour where opposites mingle, where day and night are both present, where art and fashion, masculine and feminine, discipline and dream are no longer separate categories. His life did not rise away from fantasy. It grew down into fantasy until fantasy could be worn. Now we turn to the astrology itself. As mentioned, Yves Saint Laurent was born with a sixth house stellium of five planets: Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto, all placed in this twilight region of the chart. In the house as time of day system, the sixth house corresponds to the hours of roughly about 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. Twilight, the time when day has not fully disappeared, but night has already begun to arrive. Day and night are simultaneously present. This is the symbolic and imagistic atmosphere of Saint Laurent's genius. The sixth house is often described through work, craft, service, health, daily rhythm, and technique. But when imagined as twilight, it becomes something more mysterious. The place where life is refined through practice, where the visible world begins to soften, where sharp distinctions lose their certainty. And Saint Laurent's work repeatedly reveals this twilight signature. He blurred the boundary between art and fashion. He blurred masculine and feminine through le smoking, the French word for tuxedo. He blurred wealth and poverty in his Russian Peasant Collection, and he blurred clothing and nudity through sheer fabrics. Again and again, his genius did not insist on one side of an opposition. It discovered the form that could hold both. And with Saturn in Pisces, his artistry could take form. But before we even speak of Saturn in Pisces, we already see the larger pattern. Yves Saint Laurent was born into the astrological hour of twilight. His chart is not merely creative, it is liminal, it is threshold. It is designed to sew together what the daylight mind alone keeps separated. So, if the sixth house gives us the atmosphere of twilight, Saturn in Pisces gives us the method. See, Pisces is oceanic, imaginal, it's fluid and symbolic and boundless. Saturn, on the other hand, is structure, discipline, limit, craft, time, and form. At first glance, they seem like opposites. Pisces dissolves the border. Saturn draws the line. Pisces dreams. Saturn measures. Pisces imagines, and Saturn cuts. But in Yves Saint Laurent's chart, this tension becomes his genius. Saturn in Pisces does not kill the dream. It gives the dream a vessel. It brings boundary to the boundless, form to the formless, and limit to the limitless. It is the placement that allows the oceanic imagination to arrive in the world as something cut, sewn, fitted, and worn. And because Saint Laurent's Saturn is in the first house, this is not abstract. The first house is image, embodiment, presence, and appearance. It is the visible form through which life enters the world. Saturn in Pisces in the first house becomes almost literal for a fashion designer. The dream takes shape on the body. We can imagine Saturn becomes Kronos with his scissors and his thread, the god of time as couturier, cutting a line of meaning through the sea of fantasy. And this is the central paradox of Saint Laurent's artistry. He did not choose between discipline and dream. He made discipline the sacred vessel of the dream. So before Saint Laurent became Yves Saint Laurent, he apprenticed at the House of Dior, that's Christian Dior. This apprenticeship mattered astrologically because with Saturn in Pisces, Saint Laurent needed a structure strong enough to hold his vivid imagination. Dior gave him that. Discipline, precision, quality, and form. Dior's house taught him the importance of discipline in fashion, helping temper and focus Saint Laurent's creative imagination. This is Saturn, not as punishment, but as training. The dream does not become less magical because it learns technique. It becomes possible. Here, archetypal psychologist James Hillman's growing down image from the soul's code becomes visible. The young dreamer descends into craft, into the atelier, into the daily labor of seams, shoulders, fabrics, and fittings. The soul's image begins to take form. After Dior's sudden death, the 21-year-old Saint Laurent was placed in an impossible position, heir to the greatest couture house in the world. His first major collection leading the house was the 1958 Trapèze Collection. This revealed the direction of his genius. Dior's famous silhouette had emphasized the tightly cinched waist, very tight, but Saint Laurent loosened the structure. The body could breathe, the garment could move. This is Saturn in Pisces at work. Not the destruction of form, but the softening of form. Structure remains, but it becomes fluid, graceful, and alive. The trapeze line became an early image of his larger destiny, to release the body from old restrictions while still honoring elegance, discipline, and design. One of Saint Laurent's greatest Twilight gestures was the Mondrian collection. Here, a painting did not remain on the wall. It descended into fabric, entered the body, and began to move. The ambiguity of Twilight, when art became fashion, and fashion became art. Was it clearly one or the other? Nope, it was both. This is more than inspiration, it is transformation. Saint Laurent took painter Piet Mondrian's flat geometry and translated it into the curves and motion of the living body while preserving the visual clarity of the painting. True genius. And again, we see his genius for holding opposites together, two-dimensional and three-dimensional, canvas and garment, abstraction and embodiment, discipline and dream. With his ready-to-wear line Rive Gauche, Saint Laurent brought couture across a boundary. Ready to wear did not mean the dream had been diminished. As Saint Laurent said, the difference was not design, but fabrics, handiwork, and fittings. The act of creation is the same. It just becomes more affordable to the masses. This is Saturn in Pisces again. The form changes, but the vision remains. The fantasy leaves the rarefied atelier and enters the street. Rive Gauche made Saint Laurent's world more accessible, more mobile, more modern. The dream could now be worn not only by the few, but by the many. And with Le Smoking, French for tuxedo, Saint Laurent created one of his most iconic twilight forms. The tuxedo had belonged to the masculine wardrobe. Saint Laurent brought it onto the feminine body, not as costume, but as power, elegance, ambiguity, and freedom. This was not simply a woman wearing men's clothing. It was a new image, masculine structure and feminine presence held in one silhouette. Here, the two fish of Pisces are unmistakable. Opposites do not cancel each other. They turn toward one another, bind together, and become style. The smoking did not merely blur a line, it changed what the line could mean. And in the 1976 Russian Peasant Collection, Saint Laurent again united opposites. This time it was peasant life and aristocratic luxury, village costume and opera, folk memory and haute couture. He used rich fabrics, gleaming colors, fur, chiffon, silk, velvet, and gold lame to create garments that felt both historical and dreamlike. The collection restored couture's capacity to make people dream. This is Twilight expanded. We could say it expanded it into theater. Nothing is merely practical. Nothing is merely fantasy. Because we have poverty and wealth together, earth and opera, memory and spectacle, all sewn together. Saint Laurent said the collection contained his dreams, his heroines, the novels, the operas, the paintings, everything he loved. So here, growing down means letting the soul's inner library become visible as fabric. I love that. Saint Laurent's Twilight genius was not only conceptual, it was also very visual. Even when his work used bright colors, artistic references, and theatrical glamour, there was often shadow in the design. Black, depth, restraint, mystery, and evening light. His fashions often reveal a darker, shadowy twilight aesthetic. This is part of what made his elegance so powerful. It was never merely pretty, it carried atmosphere. We could maybe even imagine the sun in Leo gave the radiance, where the sixth house twilight gave shadow. Together, they created an artistry where glamour did not erase darkness, it refined it. And if the sixth house gives Saint Laurent twilight, and Saturn in Pisces gives him the discipline of dream, Aquarius Rising shows how his work enters the future. Aquarius is the sign of the outsider, the innovator, the one who sees a new social image before culture has fully recognized it. Saint Laurent did not simply make beautiful clothing, he changed what clothing could symbolize. With Le Smoking, Rive Gauche, trench coats, trousers, suits, and androgynous elegance, he helped create a new image of the modern woman, freer, stronger, more mobile, less confined by inherited roles. His own retirement reflection names this directly. He was proud to have, quote, created the modern woman's wardrobe, end quote, and taken part in the transformation of his times. Aquarius Rising gives the chart its future facing face. The twilight becomes cultural revolution. And at the end of Saint Laurent's career, he said he was proud that women around the world wore trouser suits tuxedos, peacoats, and trench coats, and that he had taken part in the transformation of his times. That transformation is the heart of his chart. Aquarius Rising gave him the future. The sixth house gave him twilight. Saturn in Pisces gave him the discipline to bring dream into form. And through it all, Hillman's Growing Down gives us the soul story. Saint Laurent's soul image descended into craft, fabric, body, and fate. Yves Saint Laurent did not merely design clothing. He made opposites wearable. He helped create the modern woman as a threshold figure, elegant and powerful, disciplined and fluid, real and imagined at once. The fantasy became form. The dream became silhouette. The ocean could be worn. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of Yves Saint Laurent's chart, artistry, and genius. What we have seen is not only the story of a fashion designer, but the story of a soul image finding its way into the world. Through the twilight of the sixth house, Saint Laurent lived in the place where opposites mingle. Through Saturn in Pisces, he gave discipline to dream and form to fantasy. Through Aquarius Rising, that dream became part of the future. And through Hillman's idea of growing down, we can understand his genius not simply as achievement, but as incarnation. The soul's image descending into fabric, craft, silhouette, shadow, and style. Yves Saint Laurent grew down into the dream until the dream could be worn.